Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome back. Welcome back. It's your boy Paragon John. Back at you with another one. You could have clicked any video on the internet, but you chose to click this one. I'm going to say that every video because that's the truth, and that's, that's kind of my thing, right? So, guys, in this video, what I want to talk about is the idea that if you're someone who's introverted, you have a more introverted kind of demeanor. You have a very deep kind of world inside of your head, but you're not like super extroverted, or you're not speaking every single word out loud that comes to your mind, or anything like that. You just have you're more of a, you're an introvert. You're more of just kind of an introverted sort of person. Your psychology is you have a creative mind, you have a deep mind, you have a very like intellectual kind of reflective kind of introspective kind of mind. When you're that type of person in today's world, in this society that we live in today, you're going to be very misunderstood. At least that's kind of been my experience. You're going to be understood by people like on the internet. You're going to be understood by some people, but you will also be very misunderstood by a lot of regular, average, everyday people in society, whether it be people in your workplace, people like, just in public in society, whatever. A lot of times, some of your family members can kind of misunderstand you, things like that. And really, they don't understand you because when you're introverted, you have way more of like an inner world going on inside of your head that's oftentimes like more interesting than what's happening externally, and so that can confuse a lot of people, because it's like when you're in a group setting, when you're around a bunch of people, or you're out in the workplace, or you're in a place where there's just like a lot of regular, average, everyday people in a group. They're not going to understand you because you're not talking all the time. You're not just like saying random stuff to fill the air. You're not just saying meaningless crap. If you talk, if you say something out loud, it's because it's meaningful. It like means something. It's something that you think is important enough to actually say out loud. It's not just like, when you're around a bunch of extroverts, they're just saying everything that comes to their mind and stuff like this. And a lot of times it's like very kind of meaningless stuff, or it's just like validation or stuff like that. I'm not saying extroverts can't also be intellectual and creative and deep and all that sort of stuff. Of course they can, but it's in a different way. They're more externally built, externally driven. Their identity is more externally kind of derived, whereas the introvert is more, it's internally, who you are is more internal, if that makes sense. You have more to give externally oftentimes, and things like that. So that's kind of what makes the average person misunderstand you if you're an introvert, is because you're just not, they can't read your mind, they can't read your thoughts, they don't know what's going on inside of your head, they can't see that. It's not their fault, it's just like they don't see the amount of stuff going on inside of your head. They don't see your depth unless you speak, unless you talk, unless you say something outwardly. Then they can get a sense of who you are and things like that. But even then, a lot of them still misunderstand you. A lot of just regular, average, like NPC, normie, everyday people, whatever, kind of people that are asleep, if you will, if you understand what I mean by that. A lot of them still won't understand you because, like, a lot of regular, average people, they kind of live on the surface. I've said that in videos before. They live on the surface of reality. They're very much so a part of society. They're a part of like the norms and things like that. A lot of people don't really look too deeply into themselves. A lot of people just kind of are living life on autopilot, kind of just going with the flow, worrying about whatever it is that they're worried about. Like they're not, a lot of times they're not deep thinkers, right? A lot of people are not, and it's not that they're bad people or they're stupid people or they're dumb or anything like that. They're just not deep thinkers like that. A lot of people are not introverted. I mean, like being introverted, especially like I feel like in the US, being introverted is not really the norm. I feel like extroverts are the norm. We live in kind of a society of extroverted people, like, again, especially in America. So that's why introverts can be misunderstood a lot of times, because, again, you're not talking constantly. You're not just saying everything that comes to your mind. You don't really seek validation socially that much. I mean, human beings are social creatures in nature, but as an introvert, you don't really need social validation, like, to the same level that the average, like, extrovert does. You just don't, because you're self-validating. And I'm not sure where that comes from. Maybe you're connected to God. Maybe you have a bigger imagination or something like that. You just inherently know that you're worth something, or I don't know. But what I do know is that a lot of the times in my life, I can definitely recall a lot of instances and a lot of moments and a lot of times where I felt misunderstood. I felt like I was the different one, in a given group of people, or whoever I happened to have been around at the time or whatever. I've definitely experienced what it's like to be sort of kind of, outcasted, or seen as the different one when you're just introverted, really. And when you think about what introverted means, all it is a lot of times it's people that are very creative, people, like, psychologically, people that have very advanced, kind of deep kind of worlds inside of their head, that you can work from. You have more going on inside of your head oftentimes than you're expressing outwardly. That's kind of what an introvert is. You know what I mean? Maybe it's someone who, like I said, is very intellectual or whatever. But, and I want to be clear too, I'm not necessarily saying that everyone who's introverted is like a genius or is like some creative god, or I'm not trying to put introverts on a pedestal or say that they're better than extroverts inherently, or any, extroverts are better, or introverts are better, or I'm not saying anyone's better. I'm just kind of describing why I think introverts tend to be misunderstood in this society. And when I say misunderstood, specifically I mean stuff like, people will think that if you're introverted, that means that you're like an asshole, or that means that you, like, don't like them, or you think that you're, like, better than everybody, or you think that, like, you're too good to talk to them, or something like that. A lot of people will assume stuff like that if you're an introvert, because you're just kind of more to yourself. You're not necessarily just engaging with everybody, like every single thought that you have and stuff like that. You engage selectively, socially, and kind of just with your communication and things like that. A lot of people will misinterpret you and think that you're, again, you're like a B word, you're an a-hole, you think that you're superior, you think that you're better, you think that we're not good enough for you to talk to us, or something like that. That's what I mean when I say misunderstood or misinterpreted and things like that. People will assume that, oh, that person's angry, or that person's mad because they're so quiet, or something like that. None of these things are true. None of these things are true. If you're introverted, that doesn't mean that you're angry. It doesn't mean that you're mad. It doesn't mean necessarily any of these things. It doesn't mean that you hate people, or you're not social. It doesn't mean that you're being a dick, or being an a-hole, or being a b-word, or nothing like that. It doesn't mean that you're just super shy and afraid of everybody and stuff like that. Like, being introverted doesn't necessarily equal these things that people think a lot of the time. Now, it can sometimes, you know what I mean? You can be these things and be introverted too, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are. It just means that you're introverted. Or I've also heard people say that you're negative. Or if you're introverted, that means that you're negative, or they just are so depressed, or this and that, or all this different stuff. They basically just assume whatever about you if you're introverted. They'll just assume, they'll project whatever insecurity they have onto you. They'll just project onto, oh, he or she must be this or that because they're not talking constantly. It's like, no, maybe they're just introverted. A lot of the reasons that I described are why. And so, if you're, odds are, if you're introverted, or you have more of an introverted kind of demeanor or way of carrying yourself, or that's kind of how you interface with reality, you've probably been misunderstood in your life, at least at times. So you can definitely relate if you're anything like me. That's just kind of the world that we live in, guys. Like the world we live in is one where the mainstream, your average normie NPC person or whatever, they're extroverted. They just say whatever they think. Literally everything that they think, they just say it out loud. And as an introvert, you don't do that. You're more selective with how you express yourself. A lot of times, introverts don't necessarily express themselves through word of mouth as much. Maybe they have like some kind of creative outlet that they express themselves or whatever it is. But when you're an introvert, you're very intentional with how you communicate with the words you choose to use. You're very sorry guys, I got distracted there. You're very intentional with the words that you decide that you're going to use when you decide to express them, when you decide that you want to talk or speak or communicate. That's all it is, guys. So a lot of times that's why people misinterpret you. So anyways, that's the video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you guys agree. Let me know if you've ever been misunderstood for just being introverted or whatever the case may be. Let me know your experiences. Thank you guys for listening, and subscribe for more if you guys like this sort of content. See you in the next one.